All right. Can I start?
Sure.
Okay. So, hello everybody. We have a good break? Yeah, okay. Well, I'm Max. I'm from the Gridcoin community. I do volunteer scientific computing with BOINC. Now, I think the oldest account that I have is with SETI at Home, and it's from like 2009. However, recently I've been doing work for that project, and nothing personal, it's just something I do. But anyway, the name of this presentation is Gridcoin, Bitcoin, and BOINC, and this is for the 2019 BOINC workshop. And a little bit more about me. Sometimes I go by the nick FKingLag Online. Primarily, I have a background in food service, and the most recent thing I did is a food trailer business in Minnesota, having to do with selling popcorn, smoothies, and snow cones around the county fair circuit of that state. Now, another thing I do is I'm a cyclist. I'm a commuter. I ride a bike year-round. I'm a huge fan of software development. That has to do with free open source software. I've kind of known about GitHub since its fruition, and I've looked at BOINC much later. However, my involvement with GitHub itself has more recently started with just my involvement having to do with like cryptocurrencies in general. And I guess I've found some bugs in the client, and that's sort of at its legacy. And I've known about Bitcoin since its white paper in like high school, and it really divided the room amongst my peers in terms of like arguing its value, and inherent technical abilities were sort of not there in order to examine the whole process of it. But it was a really divisive thing at that time, and it still continues to stick around and do its thing. However, in the development of Gridcoin, I've been involved with just the developers in terms of the community organizing, and that's primarily what I like to do and focus. And there are other aspects I like to do, such as marketing and these other things that have to do with it, but much less. And another interesting gig I've had is I've been an industry consultant for just the video game industry, and that was a pretty sweet gig. And that was, I don't know, more than a few years ago. However, that's just a little bit of my background in terms of what I know and who I am. And yeah, volunteer work. I do a little bit of work on the side that has to do with volunteer in either blockchain or other aspects such as mental health and so on and so forth. Because I do run a few groups online, and I've tried to organize a few communities. And just the volunteer work in blockchain, I've been approached by a project to help them with Libra. And well, I've given them a lot of caution on it, to say the least. But that's just a little bit of who I am. So feel free to approach me later. We'll have something to talk about maybe, or maybe even tomorrow during the hackathon or something. We can talk more about Gridcoin. But anyway, here is Alex.
Hey everybody, I'm Alex. Mine is going to be relatively short. I am fairly new to this project. I graduated like fairly recently, and about that same time I started, joining the Gridcoin hangouts that this guy is hosting, and also, participating, like listening, just trying to absorb as much information as possible. I'm a junior like research dev, like in some undisclosed location where I just do like programming and some network automation. And having discovered that got me into the distributed computing and how useful it is. And I'm pretty much in it for the technology side, like for the absolute most part. And I showed up to support this presentation and interact with you guys. So feel free to talk to me after tomorrow, today, whenever.
So yeah, and this is both our first workshop, and I've seen the previous years, and I have looked forward to coming to Chicago, and I really appreciate the location set in Chicago this year. I just want to say that. So a little bit more of our history is continued. There's like a social media card of my own, and if anyone wants to get a hold of me or in touch, they can go ahead and do so. Do you want to say something about yours?
I'm a private person, so maybe get me a drink sometime. I don't know, but for now, just talk to me afterwards.
Okay. And we will start with the question: what is Gridcoin? You may be asking. If you are hearing about Gridcoin for the first time, this is a new concept to you, perhaps, or maybe you've heard of other things that are like it, and you've heard of something with the coin at the end, perhaps, is the idea. Now, I want to make a contrast between cryptocurrency versus ICO, and that is a very simple contrast I would like to make in order to explain a little bit more about this. And mainly, when it comes to like state law versus federal law, the definitions of the regulators tend to supersede state law sometimes. However, when it comes to property law, state law doesn't, or state law actually protects property law. And that's something that regulators are going to argue with in terms of cryptocurrency all day long. They will argue, the federal regulators and the state regulators, with these dispositions of what makes cryptocurrency what. And they are trying to stay out of the asset category with cryptocurrencies in general. However, ICOs, they lay within all these classifications that have to do with like regulatory frameworks depending upon like which country it is in. And cryptocurrencies tend to not be tied to any country of origin. And ICOs are typically initial coin offerings that are made within a country, and they are given to people through a token sale. And it is a form of raising equity as well as a vehicle for investment. So that is a brief little definition here. Furthermore, a little bit more points here. And the ICO itself can be used for like public crowdfunding, and private ICOs are becoming way more common now than the public initial coin offerings of the past. And that is more or less because of the closed private framework of regulatory matters that are coming into play. And you need to have it licensed now. And in fact, it is illegal to sell ICOs to some citizens of specific countries, depending upon the legal framework. And it is getting more tricky now. And also the definition tends to change in terms of like calling it an ICO. And they often come as different forms of it now. And I can make an argument to say that the security token offerings are just another regurgitation of this. And as a finishing point to this slide, in an ICO, a quantity of token cryptocurrency, or a quantity of cryptocurrency is sold in the form of tokens or coins in exchange for fiat currency or crypto. And that example can be either Bitcoin or Ethereum. And there are various ICOs that are trying to use Ethereum in order to raise capital on that platform and also bring a product to market.
Start circulating.
Yeah. If you want to say something about it, no?
Yeah, I think that.
Okay. And I know the previous presentation, they went through a lot of the definitions, but I will kind of go through it a little bit more to elaborate. It's also a cryptographic digital currency that is secured by the integrity of a blockchain. And the public ledger is something that you can use to cross-verify and check that the transactions have not been tampered with and that the data is secured versus being tampered with on either the fork of the blockchain happening on the network or even a hard fork on the blockchain in general. And as a matter of fact, Bitcoin is the oldest and longest chain. And I put longest in italicizing, yes, in order to explain that that is actually a good point here, in order to just say the longest chain rule applies to the whole aspect of whether or not the chain is going to succeed in consensus. And consensus is made when the reward is distributed to the miners. And each miner is competing for this consensus. And the longest chain tends to prevail, and the other chains, they fall out. The people, they don't get the reward if they compete, in other words. And a cryptocurrency is often determined by a lot of characteristics, such as the features of immutability. And also the usage as a currency is determined by the adoption of the currency itself, or the crypto, excuse me. You have anything?
If you look,
Sort of monopolizing the mic.
if you take a look at it, Bitcoin and all of the coins it's a network. And if you look at it in the simplest way, you have nodes that are running on, okay, you have nodes that are running on the blockchain that are connected, and you are just, everyone's running a program. You can just like BOINC is, and you're not just limited to transactions as as stated in the previous presentation. You can put whatever, use whatever technology you want. So I've seen people do network relays. I've seen people do all other types of messages. It's this is just one of the things that it's known for. But essentially, if you're going to leverage a network, this is in a mutable state. This is one of the ways you can do it.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Yeah, so without getting tripped up over this stuff, because it's very easy to get tripped up, including for myself. And I've been involved for this for far too long, I like to say. And anyway, so what is Gridcoin? Again, we will get to this. And to back it up all the way to Gridcoin Classic, which predates Gridcoin as it currently exists today. And originally, Gridcoin Classic was a script-based script. It was a script-based, I like to say script because it's just easier. It's that based as a encryption algorithm, and it was introduced during the year of 2013 in October. Originally, the proof of work coins were burned to proof of stake, and that was during a transferred mechanism of sorts. Just want to read an important note here that has to do with this, because the whole transition was handled by our anonymous founder, Rob Halford, and that's the name that our anonymous founder went by. Still continues to go by that, I believe. And the centralized transfer mechanism for this between Classic and the research rewards was performed by Rob. During this transition period, additional changes were made to just the economic state. And what I mean by that is it went from rewarding for the securing of the blockchain via proof of work to proof of stake, and you could, in essence, earn 1.5% annual percentage return. However, that doesn't happen anymore, and that's just holding your coins on interest. And additionally, that was the start of what was called a neural network, and it wasn't technically a real neural net as it stands in definition. However, it was called this in labeling by the founder. And there were no other ways to mine it other than solo mine. So this is also another concept. This is our Satoshi developer, meaning that they are the anonymous founder, which leads to Satoshi Nakamoto and the white paper of Bitcoin and stuff like that. And the code itself is based on a fork of Blackcoin and Novacoin, along with Purecoin, which was one of the first proof-of-stake-based cryptocurrencies. And the first mining pool for Gridcoin was Katie's pool. I do not believe that it is still in operation at this time. And I do like to lay claim to the idea that I put out the momentum for the open source pool bounty to exist. And I don't really like to lay claim to titles or that sort of thing in this space. However, I do think that I got that ball rolling. And the open source mining pool bounty was raised over a period of time for the first mining pool in order to get people to decentralize the process of this and also have an easier on-ramp for users to get started and get rewarded Gridcoin, essentially. So this looks really crazy, I know. I made this 2 years ago. This is a liquidity roadmap, it says up there. Excuse me. It says simple liquidity roadmap. It's not very simple. And Currently, this is inaccurate, very inaccurate. But at the time it was. Now, I just want to show this for historical purposes in order to illustrate the point that Gridcoin was being accepted. It was being used as a currency. It had different payment processors and also future potential exchanges for services and stuff like that. And currently, at that time, it was being accepted on a payment processor called Coin Payments, which offered multiple different choices of you as a venue for you to go into to spend your cryptocurrency. And also, I believe the Yo-Yo at Home project, they were accepting donations. They were the first project to accept Gridcoin donations 2 years ago. Yeah. So as this diagram exists here, you can see that there were different exchanges, such as these two, Bittrex and Poloniex, that were the main places that you could exchange your Bitcoin for Gridcoin. And that is something that has existed in this space for however long in terms of having Bitcoin to exchange for these altcoins. And it was more difficult to exchange it for fiat currency than it was to exchange it for Bitcoin. And that was just an inherent problem in the space at that time. Now, just the payment processors itself, like you could sell your Bitcoin after selling Gridcoin in order to get that liquidity, but there was no payment processor available that had to do with the fiat currency element without going through a middleman. And that is just to illustrate the sort of the way that the money flowed during this time. And obviously, this is just the tangible stuff. And what happens in other markets, it's much more difficult to track. So anyway, moving on to just Gridcoin itself. This is when it progressed to the next phase of development. This was when things were really starting to get decentralized. And at this time, we noticed how we can implement voting and polling onto the blockchain in order to record people's opinions and move forward with democratic consensus in a way on multiple different matters, whether that's having to do with development, marketing, social standards, and in many cases for fun. There were multiple polls that were not official, and anybody could make a poll. And eventually the barrier to entry for making a poll got raised because we wanted to take this more seriously. And I believe 100,000 Gridcoin, or you need to have 100,000 Gridcoin in your wallet in order to actually create a poll during this time. And this used to be 50,000 Gridcoin as a minimum, just to make sure that you were serious and not trying to make a pointless poll perhaps, but it would be very negligible in the damage that it creates. And it's just a part of the process of that whole feature. Now, the open source white paper began its process of creation in April 2018. Another thing about Gridcoin at this time is that it has deterministic wallets, meaning the seed of information that it generates, like the digital numbers that secure this wallet, are not random. They are not randomly procedurally generated from sources, and they are just a consecutively hashed number. And we will get to that a little bit later in terms of the contrast of that to Bitcoin. Now, Rob Helfer transferred the GitHub repository ownership to our lead developer, Marco Nielsen, lead dev at that time, who goes by Den Revon Ska. And I think I saw in previous presentation, Rayvon might be here, and I don't see Rayvon, but that's okay. And I'm just a little surprised to see the name in bold from that presentation. And anyway, the neural network still stands at that time in history, sort of. And this was the beginning of the process of having a gray list and a white list of both accompanying of projects. A little bit of trivia too, is just because it's nice to include little tidbits. The millionth block was on the same day as the August 2017 solar eclipse, and as a developer found a critical bug. And I won't say what that is, because you could very well look that up. And well, more mining pools were also happening at this time in terms of the scaling of the network, and mining pools kind of happening to incorporate new users, and people can end up creating a little bit of an income from it as well. The mining pool operators, that is. And this is a image I took from the bitcointalk.org thread, which is where I found out about Gridcoin. This is how the wallet looked around this period, just as a brief comparison, because we will see how it looks today. This distribution was done over a period of, like the distribution of coins was done over a period of, I believe, 6 months. Most of the coins were distributed in terms of this declining scale of reward. So there's an incentive to get it while it's still there. And that's one time that I got involved. And they were currently calculating most of your reward based upon a unit called mag, your magnitude. So to come full circle with this, Gridcoin is a cryptocurrency. It's not really going anywhere. It seems to have its own features of immutability, and that is a feature set that it shares with Bitcoin. It also is a scrypt-based proof of stake system still. And it's formally, excuse me, it is script-based as a new form of encryption, and formally scrypt-based. I know it's very similar, so it's easy for me to make that mistake. Please excuse me. And the former encryption mechanism is what Dogecoin still uses, along with various forms of cryptocurrency, such as I believe Litecoin also does that, and that is proof of work based. And it has a fixed block reward currently of just 10 Gridcoin per block, along with a feature called side staking, and that is a more complex thing that I'm not going to talk about, and that has to do with just the ability to send your reward to someone else in a simple explanation. And I've received various forms of reward from other people that are giving me their side stake, and they can give me their reward in a way. And that is on a side chain, fundamentally speaking. Statistics scraper nodes are another thing that was added to this new protocol. And I will get to that in a few slides. Now, with just the testnet development, we have a team on the testnet, and there's also a core development team separately. The blockchain itself is a transparent ledger. That's a little bit redundant, so I just want to make that known. And at this time, the whitelisting process is fairly automated, but it still needs the human piece in many aspects. And polling/voting is still on the blockchain. And obviously the rewards for volunteer scientific computing tasks is very prevalent in this idea. If you are still interested in this, the source code is available on GitHub. I encourage everyone to take a look if they are. I don't know if you have anything to add.
You can do pooled. Yeah, you can do for this. You can also do pooled. You can run the Gridcoin in pooled mode, which will pool your stuff. You want to continue this?
No, I don't. You got to pull it closer.
Yeah, you can. Gridcoin can also be run in pooled mode. You can run the BOINC client and do. You can finish this, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, I got.
No, you're fine. Okay. And this is as it looks like today if you were to download it and try this out. Currently, it appears to be in investor mode, and that is something that people might ask about. And eventually, it gets changed to a different mode, and it'll show your CPID. It'll show the different projects that you could perhaps be rewarded for, depending upon what statistics it is gathering. Now, there was a bit of a problem with the old neural network. And the problem was that the BOINC server load increased from the older statistics gathering methods, and the old neural network written in .NET framework only ran the neural network on Windows, so Linux couldn't run this code, unless, of course, you ran it in a virtual environment or some other method. And one thing that the credit statistics scraper did is that it helped decentralize the whole process of node staking, because when you are going to get your reward, you stake on the blockchain. You stake your reward. And this was primarily work done from the repository from Paul Jensen that is found on the community repo, the Gridcoin community repo. That repository is available for anyone to look into. Now, the Linux nodes can stake blocks, essentially, as well. That's a separate feature. And I'm just going to highlight a few of these things without going more in depth. The new design also allows people to be more trustless with the scraper nodes, despite the current amount of scraper nodes that are allowed. And it continues to use the native hashing algorithms of this protocol. The BOINC project server load has reportedly reduced, I suppose, and I can't really say otherwise. And the normal non-scraper nodes also store 0 statistics data, essentially reducing the load from 2 gigabytes drastically to 4 to 5 on your resources of storage. And the source for this information has been made public by James C. Owens. He wrote this in the Gridcoin Statistics Scraping and Reporting System, Scraper. And I think you could get in touch with him for that information directly. He is a Gridcoin developer. And just a quick little look at how it may appear in your client. This is essentially just some technical detail.
Yeah, essentially the scraper collects node information about the whole network, and you can see kind of like, this is like kind of technical output, but there is a lot of like C++ code that went into this and basically determines which nodes are available for staking, which nodes are, should be listed, and which, which projects are in use, and does a lot of data collection, which is very, interesting if you want to know about this, if you want to, use this information. There you go.
Thanks.
Oops.
Okay. So something that has to do with the Gridcoin whitelist is that we go through each individual project that we could possibly put on the whitelist just to see what the purpose is, the goals, and what else there is ascribed to this project. And you've got to make sure that it reaches a list of criteria, such as how it needs to allow new users to sign up, and preferably HTTPS in order to avoid transferring information over ClearNet or plain text, and just to make sure that there's also a project work unit availability.
Right. So essentially the point, you would need to have it secure and also have availability for users to sign up and work for it. We've seen a few projects that have restricted this, and they've been taken off the whitelist, like Enigma at Home, some others. You want to continue this?
Yeah, and I think I know that it was kind of talked about a little bit in terms of the other aspects of what or why something can be taken off the whitelist. Like, for example, Prime Grid asked to be taken off of the whitelist, and that was a process that happened very smoothly, I think. And there were various people from the community that were engaged in that in order to make that happen. It was very quick. But that's the only one off the top of my head that I can think of. I'm sure there are more examples, and they will continue to emerge. All users have an equal chance of receiving work units as well, within any one application or platform, with the following exceptions. A project may restrict work to computers generating faulty results. A project may restrict or ban users or computers for breach of either BOINC or the project's terms of service. So, carrying on. And this is going to be at the end as well, this slide, and this is just to say where you could possibly find resources having to do with Gridcoin. And we have a wiki. We do have the GitHub, obviously. And the main website that we tend to point people to is gridcoin.us. And there are ways that you can get organized within the community, because I host a weekly Mumble VoIP server sort of meetup, and that is called the Gridcoin Community Hangout. I try to be a host there. It is also streamed live on YouTube, Saturdays, 1900 hours UTC. And there's also the Gridcoin Fireside, which is a separate thing, and you can get a hold of Jay Ringo for that, and that is hosted in the official Gridcoin Discord, Thursdays, 8 p.m. EDT or 1200 UTC. So, who here, if they would care to admit, actually own cryptocurrencies? Okay, fair enough. So, just curious. And so when it comes to Bitcoin, not everybody holds Bitcoin. Not everybody will buy Bitcoin either, but they are most likely actually to get something else or hear about something else before Bitcoin. Now, what is Bitcoin? It is truly older tech meets new blockchain. And blockchain is something that is not new to 2009, I'm afraid. And that is something that I've looked into in terms of the various pieces of tech that exist prior. And there are certain inventors such as Hal Finney that created reusable proof of work, or Adam Back, who created the free software Hashcash. There's also BitGold that simulates somewhat of a digital scarcity, as well as these names such as Nick Szabo, who's part of that. And there's DigiCash with David Chaum. Similar methods, and that was a private company. And there's a lot to this. There's also W. Scott Stornetta, who helped invent collision-resistant timestamping, and that has been called a blockchain in many cases. So proof-of-work cryptocurrency is secured by the blockchain, and that is something that makes Bitcoin unique. alongside the digital scarcity that comes along with it, based upon the simulation of scarcity for precious metals outside of the digital realm. And now with our energy economies of today, we are looking at a new form of digital scarcity. And layers of complexity allow for scaling of this technology that I think we have yet to see new things come out of. And there are people such as, I would like to believe it is one of these people on that side of this slide that have said that the Lightning Network is actually a discovery based upon someone looking into it and then uncovering this technology and seeing these solutions to scaling. Now, there's a bit of a story here, and it's steeped in mystery, and that is the Satoshi origin story. A lot of people, they ask, who is Satoshi Nakamoto? And the previous presentation, Jay Ringo talked about who do I send the cease and desist letter to for this? And there is nobody. You don't really know who to send it to, and it's very difficult, if not impossible, to take down something that is going along the lines of being a censorship-resistant blockchain and the whole package of that. Furthermore, when it comes to answering this question, no one really knows. And there are some people trying to capitalize on just the name at this time. And one thing I think is very notable, though, is how Hal Finney received the first Bitcoin transaction. He walked into Satoshi's house and walked out with Bitcoin, basically. So I left this slide blank because it's just kind of complicated, this stuff. And you really should take this stuff in and also be skeptical. I agree with those words. And take it with a grain of salt. And hopefully we can all come out of it better educated, is one thing I would like to believe. And not necessarily that we're all in this together, but it's definitely a new concept. But BOINC in relation to Gridcoin is something that I really think that needs to be touched upon before we even think about that. In terms of the relationship, though, we don't really know where it's going, in my honest opinion. I've heard a lot of arguments to say that it's symbiotic and a lot of arguments otherwise. However, there are certain elements that are at play here, such as the incentives for distributed computing and how projects are actually accepting Gridcoin donations. And it looks like there's an empty point there. Now, the proof of user ID ownership using public key cryptography by GRC test on GitHub, there's a bit of a source there for this issue. That is, I think, a very cohesive and mutual example. And that will help both networks scale in turn. And although I do believe that the relationship has yet to be determined for just BOINC and Gridcoin, and it is still a work in progress to some extent. So anyway, here's that slide. And thank you for letting me talk. If there are any questions, highly technical, please leave it for tomorrow. Any simple questions?
Or you can ask me if you want.
Yeah.
And I'll answer it tomorrow, but, you know. Really, though, this space is very, it's very new, and it's also progressing at a very fast rate. So you can see, like, conventional economics, you know, doesn't apply as well, and you have to, like, also see that this is not going to go away. The people who are, you know, using this are, you know, people are not going to stop using whatever, you know, technology they're currently using. So and I've heard like people express like problems with the energy usage, how, you know, it's being used, and I think that personally, like, yeah, since this is so new, we're still trying to, you know, optimize. We're still trying to see like how to, you know, keep this going with you know, the current energy use, and how, because since it's not going away, we're trying to like still figure out how to like keep the usage, you know, going. keep the usage at a reasonable rate, how to effectively use the computing power, and how to do all things like that. So that's about it for me. You want to finish anything?
No, I want to let the next person go.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, now Jason for BOINC Planet.
Yeah, just one thing I want to comment on though, we have 2 remaining presentations, and we really have fought not cutting people off, but we do have to finish by 5. So I'm going to hold up a 5-minute warning sign at 4:25. What? Well, we were trying to avoid that all the way through and have it now, so we were trying to cut it way off. But, after that warning, we'll grab the hook.
So,
Okay.
Hello everyone. This is the first time English speech, so hope you will like it. Yeah, my name is Jason Lee. I'm a member of BOINC China community. Thanks for Kevin's invitation and having me here to present. When I was a young student, about 15 years ago, I read an article about study at home. It was the first time I realized that there is a software named BOINC that can be downloaded to help astronomers finding aliens. I was so excited, and since then, I became one of you, a volunteer, a member of BOINC. 15 years has passed. BOINC community now has grown into a large platform with nearly 30 petaflops computing power every moment and over 4 million history volunteers from all over the world. As a member of BOINC China community, I truly believe that the distributed computing will become a driving force behind the technological progress and the productivity development. Yeah, in the upcoming year of 5G era. However, we still face some problems to solve. Here is the chart. You can see the blue line shows the growth of computing power from BOINC platform during the past 10 years. And the yellow line shows the increase of global personal device, where the red line shows the increase of global data volume. Obviously, there is a huge gap between those lines. Why? We all hope to make BOINC more popular, to play a more important role in the future, right? But the truth is, why are we become more and more insignificant comparing to the dramatically increased data? Our team have spent a lot of time to think about it. We talked with Professor David Anderson, the founder of BOINC. We also talked with Kevin and also the UC Berkeley lab, and we finally drew a conclusion that we have to make some changes to attract more users to our platform. Yeah, so here comes our plan, the BOINC Planet initiative. We want to do several things from 4 aspects. Firstly, we want to build a new user-friendly client. Secondly, we want to pay more attention to marketing strategies. Thirdly, we want to spend more time on regional expansion, especially in China. And lastly, we want to try something about commercialization. Okay, the first thing is we are going to release a new user-friendly client for BOINC. I have talked with many Chinese friends, many of my Chinese friends. I have recommended BOINC to them, and the majority of them think that the current client is a bit complicated to use, just like what we mentioned yesterday, right? And here are several problems they mentioned before. For example, lack of new user guidance, unclear rules of running time, non-uniform account system, and non-uniform credit system. All these issues will discourage users from joining us, and we want to solve all these problems in our new version of client. Yeah, here we show several design pictures about our new client. Yeah, maybe we can talk about the details later. Okay, and the second thing is that we want to help the BOINC become more influential with a lot of marketing strategies, especially in China. I got a question for you. How many of you here have never used Facebook or Twitter before? Please raise your hand. Okay, one. Really? I don't believe you. You are bluffing. Only one, right? Only one people here never use Facebook. Yeah, never. Yeah. Social media is now everywhere, but we can hardly find any official information about BOINC on those platforms. I talked with Kevin yesterday, right? And he told me there is an account named the BOINC Project on Twitter, and we don't know who created this, right? Yeah. That's why we created new social media accounts for BOINC and to attract more potential users. And also that's why we created a brand new website for BOINC to share information with overseas communities. And besides, we are also going to organize online activities and offline meetups to use various growth hacking strategies to attract more people and to make BOINC more influential. Okay, the third thing is we would like to pay more attention to Chinese market. China is now have over 3 billion mobile devices with a market share of 30% of the world. And we also have excellent scientific research projects. However, the computing power and projects running on BOINC platform from China are far from enough. I think there's only one project right now on BOINC platform from China. Probably it is because of the lack of leadership and the culture difference. So that's why we decide to cooperate with the most influential media companies in China, such as TMT Post, Chindidi, and Odaily, to promote the platform with their influence. And that's why we also decide to work together with the top research institutions and universities, such as Tsinghua and Peking University, to offer more scientific research projects on our platform. Okay, and last and most important thing is that we want to try to commercialize part of the computing power on BOINC. There is the principle we truly believe that a system driven by the economic incentive will be more solid and stable than a system driven only by public spirit. Of course, it is essential to strike the balance. After deeply discussion with Mr. David Anderson, and we agreed that it would be a good strategy to introduce a token economy into BOINC. And our team now in China has made significant efforts to seek financial efforts in China. And good news is that our team have raised over 20 million US dollars in China, and part of the money will be donated to the current community to thank for all your contributions by forms of token. And we also have excellent strategic partners such as Alibaba Cloud and Jingdong Cloud, which are the China's top cloud service companies. And the Mars Lab from Alibaba Cloud will help our team to build the scalable commercial solution, where the Jingdong Cloud will probably purchase our commercialized computing power directly. Our team have decided not to make any profits until we bring BOINC's total computing power to over 100 petaflops, and as our commitment to the current community. And after that, we will gradually trying to sell the computing power to public and to donate most of the revenue to the current community, to the existing users by forms of token. And to achieve these goals, we have built an excellent team based in Berkeley and in Beijing and in Hangzhou. Yeah, here's our team. Xiaoping is our lead architect of blockchain, who is an excellent engineer and used to work in Intel. And Chen Feng is our CTO, who worked in Douban company, which is one of the largest social platform in China. And Professor David Anderson, who used to be our advisor and right now is our chief scientist. He will help us to develop the new version of client. And me, Jason, I'm the CEO of the project. And more importantly, I'm a big fan of BOINC platform since I was a child, as I mentioned before. I'm a serial entrepreneur in China. I ran and then sold out my first company when I was 23 years old. And then I joined one of the largest internet company in China. The name is Didi, which is kind of like the Chinese version of Uber. And we also have an excellent product team and operation team. To achieve these goals, we know that we, the team, is far from enough. We know that to achieve our dream, we still need you. We need everybody in the community to help us and to support our BOINC Planet initiative. I think it takes a long time to explore and find aliens or gravitational waves to conduct genetic testing and cancer therapy. We know that for a long period of time, our exploration may get no results, but we still need to keep trying because truth is priceless, because dream is priceless, and because life is priceless. So may computing power revolution change the human civilization. Thank you. And if you guys got any questions, all my team here will help me to answer. Yeah. Okay.
You mentioned commercialized computing power.
Yeah.
How would you compare yourself versus all of the other competitors in that space, like Qualcomm and Hyperdrive?
Okay. The question is, what's the difference between our project with Bitcoin or Golem, right? I think the first thing is that we are not only a blockchain team. We also spend a lot of time to do the marketing strategies, to do the branding things, and to activities and something like that in China. Yeah, we focus on Chinese market. And the second thing is that we raised a lot of money. Yeah, and we want to donate part of the money to the current community. We want to be more closer to the current community. Yeah.
What would, follow up on that, the issue with the current computing marketplaces that are live is the security issues around the data. So how is your platform going to solve that problem?
Yeah, with blockchain technology. Yeah, we will have the mainnet. Yeah, Catherine can help me answer.
Oh, okay.
You can repeat the question first.
Yeah, very brief introduction myself. So my name is Catherine, and I'm the advisor of this initiative in the U.S. So I was a senior banker in Wall Street before, and after 20 years I retired. And now I was trying to find something fun to do. Okay, so the question is, what's the major difference between all the competitors in terms of product and other computing power sharing network or platform? So Jason mentioned that once the financial support definitely makes a difference in terms of what kind of team we build, what of the talents we recruit, and to build that infrastructure. I think more importantly, one is we realize that we need to really partner with BOINC and you guys to get a lot of experience how we can make it happen in the real world instead of just issue a token or send away token to really just recruit a contributor, because we find out by talking to many experts and scientists in terms of what kind of infrastructure would work for a specific computing task that I asked the question this morning, and which is very critical in terms of understanding the limitation, but also really utilizing what we have today. And if we can introduce the token economy successfully, we truly believe that with that economic incentive, we will grow our contributing force significantly. And we also try to redirect a lot of computing power from just simply mining to get Bitcoin to doing something meaningful. That's why I think the marketing strategy and the team we build with a lot of talent in that area would really helps us. And also we quickly formed a partnership with the top media in China, top cloud service company in China as well, because they also realize, as 5G is approaching and IoT and edge computing, there's a lot of emerging technology, and they have to also partner with not only a blockchain technology company, but also a experts or team like us who really knows how to run the community, to engage people, especially the young generation, to do things meaningful altogether. So I hope that would answer your
I have
question.
more questions, but I'll follow up later.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
You mentioned about re-engineering with clients. Can you give more information on that? Because of course the clients know GPL is open source software. So is your intention to completely develop a new client from scratch, or are you going to be branching and then recommitting the development of your new client back into the point repository?
OK，他是问更多关于那个 client 的细节是吧？
Yeah, the question is just make it simple. How do you improve or remake the client end, and how that would associate or relate to BOINC?
Oh, I'll try to answer in English. Yeah, maybe you can help me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we talked with David, and I think Science United is a good try, but it's not enough. So we think the first version of our client is to add more. You try. I'll tell her and she can. Yeah， 我觉得第一个呢，就是我们需要把现有的整个的账户体系打通。然后而不是零散的一个一个的项目，它积分是零散，它账户是零散的。我们只有把所有的用户拿到一起，我们才能把所有的数据汇集到一起，我们才能更好的去了解用户。所以第一步呢，是我们要有一个网站，类似 Science United， 然后去让所有的用户引导所有用户，它有一个统一的账户体系。我们把它以往在各个项目上零散的数据汇集到一起。对，然后第二步就是我把这些东西放到那个本地的 client 里面。先说这个事情。
Okay, so yeah. The upgrade of the client and will go through multiple phases. The first one, as Jason just mentioned, we need to be a little bit more user friendly. And as he recommended to a lot of Chinese friends and young people, and people complain it's not easy to use, multiple account system and how they track the credits. They even don't know this thing's running, in the back. And it's like it's a secret project. So that's why we realize, we do not very technical change in the first phase, but more functional, right? So make it more user friendly. So one thing we're gonna do is how we have one consistent account system or credit system for people to use and to kind of recognize people for the credits they get. And then it would actually later integrate with the token economy. And to reward people for whatever they contribute. And needs to be synchronized and with a very consistent accounting system.
So
Go ahead.
So the credit system is essentially, each project runs their own credit system because each project essentially runs a different workload and therefore generates it. So I'm not entirely certain how the client development is going to create a single uniform credit system. But sorry, you didn't. So go back to my first question. Are you basically saying you're going to step up and redevelop the client within the BOINC repository, i.e. you're going to redevelop our client for us, I'm sure that's the community client, or are you going to set up your own parallel client development?
Okay, let me.
Alongside the continued development of the client, which was this morning by the client release manager.
他有说在技术上，你是把这个现在 BOINC 的只是把它改一改，还是全部重新再做一个，还是说
OK 就是第一步是说我基于现有的去改它的体验，然后就让它更好用，然后一些边边角角修复，然后当我要把我整个那个 token system 加进去的时候，可能对它是一个比较大的修改，就一步一步走。然后我们想的是我们要先做 MVP， 就先要就是为了让用户能够在 BOINC 得到积分，我做的最小限度的改动是什么，我就只做那个 maybe 2周3周我们就做完，然后我们有更大的计划一步步去推进，最后会对它就是把我们想要的功能放。而且最核心的一点，我们不是去考虑技术上要变什么，而是产品我们要做什么，技术去配合产品。对，就是产品驱动而不是技术驱动，这个非常重要。
Okay. Yeah, Jason coming from a product management background, so that's why his emphasis is the first initial phase to engage more people is really to create a pleasant user experience, right? For people who don't know about science projects or BOINC, how to download, how to install, just feel like a couple of clicks, it's so easy. And there's education, there's transparency. So that's what he tried to do more kind of from a product perspective to drive more engagement first, not very core technical function. So the first case, they won't change the core technical function of BOINC account.
I think maybe to restate David's question, if you've incorporated any of the source code from the BOINC repository, that's licensed under the LGPL. And when you release your client, you're under a legal obligation to release your source code. What is your plan for releasing that source code and contributing it back to the community?
这就是问，这就是一个这就是法律的问题了，就是说，因为这个是 open source， 它是 under 一个这个 license 的，那么你如果把它改了，那大家都在用的时候，那么这个 legal process 你们是
就两个，一个是说我相当于我自己在就是基于它的代码，我发了一个新的客户端。第二是我们拿了 UC Berkeley 知识产权办公室独家的商业授权。对，我们觉得在法律层面上这个事情是行得通，可以这么回答。
From a legal perspective, the initiative team has formed a partnership and also purchased the license with Berkeley, UC Berkeley IP office to make some change with the guidance from Professor Anderson, and so that they will make very careful plan in terms of how they can minimize the impact through the migration. And that's kind of from a legal aspect.
You might want to talk to your lawyers about who owns the copyright, because there is no traceability on who's contributing code and signing over copyright to Berkeley. So it is not clear that Berkeley owns the copyright to give a new license.
Okay. 他说这个从法律的层面上，你可能要去找律师，要问一下，因为不是 Berkeley on 这个的，那这个就很 tricky 了。就是说我们不需要在这里弄。他意思就是说你现在买的不是这个。
明白。OK.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion. Definitely will verify that. But I think our intention is really to make this client end more user friendly, so that we can engage more users in China.
Well, outside of China, when you come to say it's version 10, that is functional, safe, and stable, would you then allow that, put that in the BOINC repository so that someone else can bring that and use your interface on our computers as opposed to just the Chinese?
No, this is open source. My understanding. 我就问他，就是说，如果你们做得很好，都第10个版本了，做得特别好，那大家其他的非公益性者也能用嘛？那肯定是能用。
就希望大家都来。
Yeah, this is open source, and that's our initial goal. That we want to engage more. So that's why Jason also mentioned before we make any profits, we want to bring this community's computing power or processing capability from 30 petaflop to 100, right? So, and then we have enough so that we can decide how much we'll continue to contribute to the community for nonprofit purpose, and how much extra we're gonna sell, since we have a partners who's gonna need that type of processing power.
Okay, so I just want to follow up on this.
Okay.
You use the phrase open source again. So when you release your client, where's the source code?
他就是说你说的是开源，那么如果是你把这个 client 重新再做一遍的话，你的 source code 在哪里？
就是在我们把这个做到100P 之前，我们可能都是开源，
我知道，他就是说，那你的 source code 在哪里？
就是
说
代码
如果你
放
对，你放在哪里？
就放在 GitHub 上。
So if we understand your question correctly, is if we make a change or we make a parallel change and create a new client, everything will be stored in GitHub for sharing.
So you're going to be publishing all of your client code
我
on
觉得这个我们可以更多的去讨论，听听他的意
What's
见。
that?
under a different repository?
Under a different repository, I think all the details we can continue to study and figure out, which is the best way to serve the community first, and I think we are in the process of figuring out what are the things we need to change, how we make the change, where we release the code, or how we manage the release management process, etc. So I think there's a lot of details that we need to figure out with all the support from you guys. It's not like we want to do something and go ahead and do it, right? It's a teamwork. Any other questions?
Okay.
I will just make a comment. I've been in the blockchain space since before ICOs, and this is why I say be skeptical. So I really like the ideas of what you're saying and what you want to do.
Thank you.
But I'm just skeptical. I want to see evidence of intent.
Yeah, I think the skepticism is valid, right? So, and because especially a lot of speculation and the bubble created and burst, in the past 2 years. So, I mean, any new technology emerges always with bubble. I mean, everyone understand, 1999, the dot-com bubble burst, and then it follows with a lot of, new companies. So I think I will. So that's why we won't sit there and just watch and complain. This is the bubble. We want to do something meaningful, and we want to show this is something that works. And with everyone's support, we can really use the computing resource to do something meaningful instead of use them just to mine the coins.
Yeah. No, I get it. The money aspect, I think I'll.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. This is John from BOINC.com. That just pitches.
Could I open up one more web page? Just one more tab for me there. And then, so you're gonna switch between, I think it's, that application here. And how do I go back into presentation mode? Oh, so when you go back into presentation mode, only you click this, and go to presentation. Okay. So, and hit escape to get out. Escape to get out, and then here's your browser right behind it. Okay. So, but it's this bottom one that you'll. Gotcha. I'm gonna sit over here, so just in case. Sure. Yeah, you're on Where is it? Oh. Just a shortcut? That's true. Okay. Okay. My name is John Heater, and I'm the founder of BOINC.com. which I like to call the social supercomputer, because I'm trying to bring together the kind of social incentives with the supercomputing power of the BOINC platform. And I just wanted to say, like, this entire presentation is very grounded. It's basically everything that works today. But before I go into all that, I just wanted to say, like, Gridcoin is the reason that I'm here. And Gridcoin is the reason that I got introduced to blockchain. It took me a very long time to wrap my head around it. And once I realized the kind of value creation that happens, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is going to change everything. And there's a great story from the Winklevoss twins, how they got into Bitcoin. They were traveling in Europe and they needed to send $100,000 to someone in the US, and they found that putting the cash in a briefcase and flying it across the ocean was faster than sending it like a wire transfer. And they're just like, why is that? And if you grew up with the internet, it's very strange that you can send like an infinite amount of data, but you can't send $1. So something to think about. Okay, what do? I empower everyone to participate in distributed computing. And I do that from a perspective of user experience, design, and incentives. And that comes from my background in the art and design industry, the video game industry. I'm really have a very strong understanding of like how to incentivize people to do things. What do people care about? And it was the thing that I felt was lacking the most when I got involved in this space. So why is user experience important? A few of the talks earlier have already talked about this. Basically, users today are accustomed to these extremely refined social experiences. Push notifications. I mean, Facebook has, engineers that are working full time just to figure out how to get someone to stay on the site for 2 seconds longer, right? Loading times, all these little things. Where, by contrast, the existing BOINC interfaces feel dated and confusing to most people. To people in this room, probably don't even notice because we've been using it for so long, just seems totally normal. For someone outside of the distributed computing, scientific computing space, it's extremely confusing. Also, the structure of BOINC, kind of as it was designed, is this idea that the researchers set up the server and they get people to contribute their computing resources. And that was easy with SETI at home and the kind of initial enthusiasm around that. But we've seen that existing core community dwindle over time because the incentives only appeal to a narrow demographic. And the incentives of BOINC are you can do something awesome, contribute to something important, be part of something bigger than yourself. And there's a little bit of bragging rights. There's like your credits and medals and the social forums and things like that. However, that entire social experience that's built into BOINC hasn't changed for a very long time and has plenty of issues, which I'm sure you're aware of. And yeah, I mean, let's face it, scientists are not marketing people, and they shouldn't be marketing. They should be focusing on what they're good at. So the solution is to use monetary and social incentives to engage groups that have network effects. So we have this concept called a team leader that defines the language and vision of their BOID team. And they invite their existing community that already exists on other social media platforms to join them on BOID. When users join them on BOID, they compete on leaderboards, and they have like challenges, time-limited challenges, all this kind of like time-limited engagement that keeps people coming back. And the humanitarian causes, basically what that means is like you can donate your earnings to charity, you can contribute to social good. It's much easier to get someone interested in distributed computing. Like if you tell someone like, hey, run this on your computer and you'll make $1 a day, and or if you tell someone like, most people would be like, that sounds like a scam. They're going to steal my credit card information or something like that. But if you tell someone like, hey, run this on their computer or you'll contribute to cancer research, a lot of people are much more likely to accept that. So what is BOID? I'd say it's at the very core, it's a platform to empower massive engagement with distributed networks. And when I say massive, I mean everyone on the planet can use BOID. If you can use Facebook, you can use BOID. And I made this video a year ago, but it's still pretty relevant.
Blockchain is complicated for a lot of people. That's where BOINC comes in. BOINC is a meta platform that brings many complex technologies under one easy-to-use interface, allowing users to directly participate in blockchains and distributed computing projects. You can start by logging into BOINC.com or installing the BOID app. Your contributions are summarized into BOID power. The more contributions, the more your BOID power will increase. Higher BOID power increases your ranking in the leaderboards and increases the amount of money you earn. BOID uses blockchain technology to convert BOID power into money in the form of cryptocurrencies. Each team can raise money for charity by contributing their computing resources towards underlying decentralized protocols. Teams can also donate their computing power towards important scientific research projects that need massive computing power to solve complex problems. Join us in building a world where people directly participate in the future of finance and scientific progress without relying on intermediaries. Be a part of something huge. BOID.
Yeah, so hopefully that from Jesus. Sorry. Okay. So hopefully you get an impression of the market that I'm going after here. I'm not talking about why it's on the blockchain. I'm not talking about, all this kind of technical stuff that most people don't care about. I'm saying this is how you can participate and here's the benefit to you. So there's 3 pillars. There's social engagement, monetary incentives, and gamification. And before I go any further, the word BOID is, if you don't know, it's a software simulation for simulating a flock of birds. BOID means a birdoid object. So I picked the name BOID because BOINC is all about this kind of emergent property of individuals providing a small amount of computing power in aggregate becomes a substantial amount of computing power. So you have this emergent property that I thought was very interesting. So what is BOID actually? It's a social network, and it's a application like that you install on your computer. So the social network is built around this concept of teams, and each team has a leader. And this team-based ecosystem taps into this kind of innate, tribalistic, competitive nature of online communities, which is extremely powerful. And so because the individuals get onboarded by the leaders dictate the language which is able to attract individuals. So we give them tools. Instead of me trying to be the marketer, I say, you know how to talk to your community. Here's the tools. The tools are monetary incentives, social incentives, and gamification. Pick a balance that fits for your community. So the leaders, of which we have about 20, they love the tools that the BOID platform gives to them. We recently came to an end of the BOID season 1, which was a 2-month time-limited period, and I sent out a survey to all the leaders, and 80% of them said that the social good and scientific research language was very effective for them to onboard users. About 20% said that the passive income was the most interesting thing to their users. So it's important that we can attract different demographics, different kinds of people into the space. I don't really care why you're here, as long as you're, contributing to the network. It's great. And over on the left here, you can see the leaderboard. So that's the leaderboard of the teams. The teams compete against each other. They try to out-compute the other team. And this is some more feedback from the survey. I said, what's your favorite feature of BOID? Why do you find that feature valuable? They said, leaderboards and competition between teams. The gamification is great. They said, mining because it makes money. Fair enough. Stat tracking, leaderboards, gamification, ease of use, great interface, helping make the world a better place. Team promotions. And this, I think, is very important. Prior to BOID, what was your experience level with distributed computing platforms? So you can see 50% were familiar but never participated, and 20%, only 20% of the users had actually used distributed computing in the past. So really, 80% of our team leaders don't really have any prior experience with distributed computing. So the fact that I was able to onboard them and they were able to onboard their communities to the BOID platform shows that the user experience works. So a BOID season is kind of like it's a marketing cycle. So all the team leaders can hype up their community around the same time. It creates this kind of social media buzz by segmenting the BOID network into these time-based seasons. And these images that you see here are some examples of infographics that are posted on Twitter and social media platforms to try and attract people to join for BOID season 1. Starts on April 21st. Get in, stake your tokens now, things like that, trying to get people excited about competition. For BOID season 0, which is kind of like our alpha season, over $10,000 worth of cryptocurrency was distributed to users from the team leaders just to incentivize them to join their team. So it just shows, again, the power of that kind of tribalistic competition. So I also have this team promotion protocol built in at the core level. So what that means is you can give away physical swag, stickers, t-shirts, hoodies, all kinds of stuff. And it's based on the competition within a certain team. So as an individual, you have to decide which team has the best incentives, which team do I want to be on. So there's a game to it in that aspect, because you're missing out on the prizes of the other teams that you're not on. And so you'll see a lot of individuals reaching out to team leaders and saying hey, why don't you add more prizes to your team? I'm going to leave and go join this other team if you don't give us something. So it's very fun. But what do the BOID users do? Well, they log in with an email password. They have a profile, like a profile image, tagline. They choose a team, and then they download the application. And this is just an example of the branding around the application. So the branding is just as basic as I can get. The BOID app, just set it and forget it. Secure, simple, seamless, passive income, do good, social competition. I'm just trying to get people to download it. But what is the BOID application actually? It's a modular Electron app, a single interface that enables anyone to contribute to BOINC and dozens of blockchains with zero technical ability. So it is basically the interface for random social media type people to participate in this extremely complex and confusing distributed networks. And the application is responsible for orchestrating all these protocols on the back end. And here is an example, or here is the application. This is the user flow for the application. So you log in. Email, password, login. You don't have to pick a project or make any decisions really. And this is it. This is how you run Boid. That's it. So you click the button to turn it on. It's downloading, installing, and now it's running 12 work units. And if you want to dig into what's happening behind the scenes, you can expand these windows open and you can see the progress of the individual work units. You can query the server to find like pending work units and their status, so you get an idea of like what's in the queue. And also you can take a look at the validated work units. So you'll see that the validated work units, they have a credit, which is what I get from World Community Grid, and they also have a weight and a power, which I'll get into next. So weight is kind of like, so let me back up. Boid power is kind of like my RAC system. And basically every work unit is assigned a weight according to when it was finished. And then I have a global multiplier that can be adjusted over time that determines, that takes the credit, multiplies it by the weight, and that gives you the power that that work unit contributes to your account. And Boid power is kind of like hash rate. I have a slide on it. This is the CPU settings window. Very basic. The most just kind of the most necessary type things. Here's the GPU section. So you don't have to know anything about proof of work or cryptocurrencies. You just click a button and it starts mining proof of work cryptocurrencies on your GPU. So effectively, I've combined the kind of social good BOINC science projects with economic incentives of the proof of work chains. I'm trying to find a balance. I'm trying to find something that gives you the best of both worlds. Okay. All right. So you install Boid, and Boid generates, or you install the Boid application, and it generates Boid power on your Boid account. Boid power is a universal metric to dictate how much computing resources a computer has provided to the network. And I had to come up with my own metric because Boid is much more than just BOINC. It has multiple other protocols integrated, and I need a universal single number that you can look at that tells you your contribution across all of these underlying protocols. And the weight or priority, like how much Boid power gets generated by each one of those protocols, can be adjusted over time by the community. So for example, proof of work is more profitable than mining Gridcoin, for example. But the community might prioritize science projects over proof of work. So on the Boid platform, your proof of work is actually much less profitable than doing science projects. And what that does actually is it subsidizes the science projects, which normally would be much less valuable. But because you're kind of socializing the cost with the GPU miners, the CPU science projects actually become much more profitable by running in parallel with proof of work. Here's some feedback from the Boid users. I'm running Boid on every computer I have. If you want to contribute to a good cause while earning some crypto and having fun, then Boid is the right app for you. Easy to use, doesn't require a latest computer, helpful team. You can join teams, take tokens, and more. And these are non-technical people. Continue doing what you're doing, and I'm convinced the community will follow the vision that Boid has laid out. Helps the world, has a good team, makes many improvements every day, is user-friendly, makes you feel good, right? So I've unlocked this kind of incentives of BOINC to the cryptocurrency community. So here's the, I did a user survey last year. I launched in August last year. I did a survey a few months later to try and figure out where people were coming from. How did they find out about Boyd? And actually 40% of them found out about Boyd from the token airdrop that I did, which I was very surprised. Basically, I sent free tokens to a few 100,000 accounts on the blockchain, and I added a little memo and said, like, hey, come check out Boyd and you can earn more tokens at the Boyd website. So that actually worked really well. But you can see 25% of people came from the team announcements. So like I said, these teams get very competitive. The team leaders will post on social media and say, hey, you should join my team for this reason. Don't join that team. Those guys suck. You know, so you get this. So essentially, the team leaders are doing my marketing for me, and they're self-incentivized to do that. And as 80% of the users said they'd be disappointed if Boyd was discontinued. And 75% of the existing users never participated in distributed computing before Boyd. So how does Boyd compare versus other solutions? So on this chart, I have Charity Engine, BOINC, and Gridcoin, which are all, I mean, everyone's fairly familiar with all those things, but I would argue that all these BOINC-based applications don't have a friendly user experience, which I think is extremely important for massive adoption. And only some, and then I also have like MinerGate, NiceHash, and do-it-yourself mining. So if you are just interested in proof of work mining, you might use one of those services. Those services, they offer like a monetary gain, but they don't offer any kind of social incentives. So they have very limited appeal to people that are interested in something more than just passive income. So yeah, Boyd tries to, you know, I think I already said this, but it combines the incentives from the kind of do-good social side of things with the monetary incentives. Here's some screenshots from World Community Grid. The Boyd team is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right under Charity Engine 3 on the global leaderboard in terms of daily contributions to World Community Grid. We have about over 4,000 devices registered to this particular BOINC account, and we've done 2,900 years of scientific research. We're number 18 ranked in terms of just total compute hours, and we launched a year ago. What's next? So Boyd is transitioning to a fully decentralized application. Right now, the token is decentralized, but a lot of the logic runs off-chain. So we're moving all the logic to run on-chain so that it can be governed by the community that uses it. And also the community can benefit from the revenue generation and the continued success of the project. We're currently considering which BOINC project should be integrated into Boyd next. Currently, I only have an integration with World Community Grid. A lot of people are asking for SETI at home. So you know, maybe weather prediction, we'll see. In order for us to consider your BOINC project, I do have an ask, which is that in order to ensure the security of these blockchain networks, we need BOINC server operators to start hashing their work unit data to a blockchain that we can read from. What this does is, so like when your Boyd BOINC client downloads a work unit, that work unit is encrypted with the key from the server so that the client knows that it's valid. That's great, fantastic. The problem is that when you do a query to the API to get information about the work units, that API is not secured in the same way. So I have no idea if this API is returning valid results or not. It's possible that the work units are not compromised, but the API is compromised. And it's fine if you're just dealing with credit, but once you start dealing with real world monetary value, it's extremely important that we have all these things nailed down as much as possible. And if anyone has any questions about how to do that, I could show you. It's actually not that complicated. And it would allow projects like BOID and other kinds of value creation networks to be built on top of BOINC much more seamlessly in the future. We're also working on a modification to the BOINC server that uses private key based authentication instead of the current kind of email password. And the reason is basically, why should I have to register with your server in order to contribute to it? Why couldn't I just sign the results of the work units with my private key so you know that I did the work, but you don't need to know any other information about me? We also offer a BOINC project consulting service. Basically, like if you have a science project that you want to run, but you don't want to go through the hassle of setting up a BOINC server and trying to convince people to contribute to it, you can. We will basically market it to our existing community and help you to translate your existing computing tasks to run on BOINC. So basically, you can just continue doing your research, and we'll worry about marketing and amassing the computing resources that you need. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me if that sounds interesting. And that's it. Any questions?
You mentioned that the community decides the weight of how much you want to throw into science projects versus
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by community? Is it at the team level or at the board level?
So that goes back to what I was saying about we're transitioning to running it fully on chain. So right now it's more just kind of like the community tells me what they want, and then I go and fiddle with a variable. But the BOID token can basically be used to adjust those things over time by the community in the future. So I won't be like a central point of failure in the system. But yeah, the idea is basically like these variables are basically like social sentiment, like what the community thinks is valuable, which I think is something like if you have a system that doesn't have very much social input, you end up with this kind of technocracy where like only the extremely technical people determine the value system of the platform, and that doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cheating. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've pretty good. Yeah. So I've heard. So I completely hear you. I completely understand what you're saying. Like I said on like one of my first slides, like I'm very, very focused on incentives. So trying to figure out like why do people contribute and why do they not contribute? And the truth is that today there's less people contributing than there used to be. And one of the reasons is monetary incentive. It's not all the reasons, and there's always going to be people that care about the kind of social good. But the monetary side of things is basically
where we're heading. So we have to build systems that are robust for doing that, and that's just kind of the way things are going to be honest.
But we had a huge increase in people signing up for their contribution, orders of magnitude increase in the number of people. So actually, I think one of the issues around our software community is, I suppose, in some ways, it's over some of our projects we've become pretty quite lazy. We run the events ourselves. We don't. I told you I was mentioning, I don't know. We largely talk about moderators, the occasion we talk about volunteers, our linking to our volunteers is not well done.
Yeah.
There are lots of best practices that we have done in the past, mostly when we have encouraged our services actually individual stuff for us. And you notice that we were very steadily growing. I think there's, and whether I want people to be contributing to my project who are in the financial gap, bearing in mind that we're a climate project, so using their GPUs for mining at the same time, I'm asking them to calculate how energy utilization is generally on climate projects and energy problem. I'm getting them to use their energy to study climate change. It's slightly worse.
I love it. I would spend a lot of time talking with you about it. Very valid concerns. The only thing that I would leave the conversation with would be like there's a reason that there's just exponentially more money put into finding the cure for hair loss than many much more important things, right? Because there's an economic incentive, and that's just kind of sure, but proportionally things are not really don't really pan out. Any other?
I do agree with John that economic incentive is why we have such a lot of crap out more about it and stuff. But I'm curious about the cheating aspect. Like how do you have a way to stop people from cheating? Because it's the same question you're like, incentivized projects do go through validation or double validation.
Yeah, so I mean that's why eventually, or we're moving in the direction of like having our own BOINC servers and our own science projects where we have more control over things. If you're familiar with like delegated proof of stake, you have these kind of elected delegates that are responsible for running the network. BOINC servers can be run on those delegates, and then those delegates can check each other. And BOINC servers have redundancy built in. That's just to me, redundancy is just the cost of decentralization. If you don't want redundancy, then you either have to trust the results or you have to do it in a centralized way. There's like Intel SGX enclaves where you can prove that something was done in an honest way on an Intel enclave, but it's extremely bad for performance, and there's all kinds of other technical issues. Right. Nice. Yeah. So So in the context of something like that, where you literally don't know if it's valid until you have a certain number of results or something like that, the community would probably would decide that not to incentivize that project, because there is just no way to validate it unless maybe it's like a asynchronously validated, you know. Yeah. Yeah, and random walk and things like that, you can't. Yeah, so that's why, like, a lot of blockchain projects, they try to do things in a very deterministic way and remove human intervention. But when you're talking about something that's as subjective as scientific research, you do need some kind of a system where people can come in and attest to the validity of things. That's like the entire design of how this thing works.
On the question of validity, I think there are two separate parts. One is the scientific result of research that can only be assessed by scientists as a problem in the first place. And the second one is the time management, time accountancy, resource accountancy of the processing effort that's gone into generating scientific results. And I think that there are problems, there have been problems historically with each of those. I think back to the other I say in the early days of secondary, somebody just result the same result every time. It was actually checked. Yeah. And didn't realise they were simply copying the file, not doing science at all.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a result validation. We have a recent case we could discuss on the BOINC project mailing list. Eric Driver at the University of Arizona, who was doing pure mathematical research in a number of fields, found that people were fiddling the runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And the time spent, CPU time, elapsed time, and his particular credit system at the time was sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Somebody somewhere suddenly acquired a massive amount of BOINC credits because they didn't
Right.
the reports, not because they didn't the time.
I mean, the reason. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the reason that proof of work is a thing is because you can objectively validate proof of work, and you always know if it's true or false, and there's no subjectivity involved in the system. If we can take something that's subjective, like scientific computing, and make validation more objective, it doesn't have to be 100% objective. If we can make it more objective and build systems that facilitate that, then we can take a lot of the value creation that goes into proof of work and move it to proof of something useful. Yeah, WCG.
It's nice to see that effort didn't go away.
To me, yeah. Oh, nice. I mean, I think it's extremely clever. I understand that it's like wasteful, but if you're doing something on a distributed network, there's costs of redundancy, and I mean that's just kind of the name of the game.
It still counts as Oxford contributions. We don't have to buy.
Mm-hmm.
The reason this is done is because banks and very large multinationals are very carbon intensive, and if you didn't do this, they could relatively far out of third parties in other countries, and they wouldn't have to worry about it. So it's been deliberately brought in so that you can't get rid of your carbon contribution. And so
The value is distributed consensus. You can argue if that's valuable or not, but that's the reason it's done. Mm-hmm.
But you're not a good laptop. Say 1 out of 10,000 laptops has a bad memory chip. You don't know about it. Higher than that. Well, I'm just giving a number. It doesn't. That's just arbitrary. But there's 1 out of a million. 1 out of 10 million doesn't matter. How many work units have you run? That computer creates bad work units. You could have hit the lottery and you got that one bad computer on your whole thing. It's the most powerful machine in your network. You have no way to check, make sure that the result is good, right? So,
But in all fairness, the work that you do is about 5,000 models and how the ensembles play out in it overall.
yeah.
And so a few bad results in 5,000 is no big deal. Yeah, when we're running a target against the virus, and that target happens to be the cure for everything, and it runs on a bad machine, we've lost it.
Yeah.
And so different projects have different needs.
And your redundancy is in the number of models. It's not that you have to have redundancy. You're running 5,000 models when you could have run 2,300. So you wasted power for that.
Well, it's not great.
Well, I know, but I'm using his argument again.
I guess that's,
I mean, like this is a project where we are looking for
But yeah.
So, so
all right.
I would, for example, if you wanted to make your work units more objective, you could do something like hiding an objective proof of work inside some of them. You understand?
No, well, we use that technique too. I mean, that's where you hide something that you can compute and validate.
Yeah.
It's hard to compute, easy to verify.
And then
you do that, but you do sometimes actually do full validation. We will never.
Oh yeah.
You can look at our result files and you'll see the
I mean, I personally think that distributed consensus is extremely valuable. And if that means that we need to waste energy on replication and these other kinds of checks, that's, to me, that is totally fine. And we'll build systems that reduce the amount of replication needed and things like that over time. Anything else?
Thanks, Sean.
Oops.